distributed here. They have 1 million of them in prisons. They have 1 million of them in work camp, and they're not telling anybody about them. Like 2 or 3 got out through some sort of asylum program, and now they're starting to expose this. So all these countries have secrets that we don't know about. And as we begin to move more and more into the age of Aquarius, remember the show I told you about how these things are going to be exposed? Right now, you see the leadership of every major institution. You name it. Political, religious, all of these institutions, educational, all of these institutions, these leaders are starting, their faults are starting to be shown, so they're beginning to crumble. So when that happens, you're going to have another order step in. And that order is not going to be what you expect it to be, because most people still think they have a Bill of Rights. You can scratch that. Listen, brother, I appreciate you giving me the time. I'll shoot you a text to see if we can make this happen next Wednesday, if not the following Wednesday. But I want to make sure I touch base with my wife so that we can be on the same page at the same time doing the same thing. And for those of you who sent those, go ahead, Brother Dave.
No, finish, Brother Davis. No, finish. Go ahead.
For those of you who sent those well wishes and sent prayers for not only my family, but the people who were in the hurricane, all of that is appreciated. Keep it coming, because we're still doing work on how we're going to be able to come back and at least land on our feet. The South and North Carolina and South Carolina, North Carolina primarily in my research, but South Carolina also, have really gone through a devastated process. And it's going to be a while for them to regroup. So keep your prayers coming. I appreciate them all.
The recording has started.
Brother Davis, real quick,
please
listen,
announce yourself.
Take your time. If you need anything, text and call me directly. But take your time. You don't do a show this week. Let's just put it off for next week so that you and Sister Davis can focus on what you need to focus on, and because you're also going to need some rest as well. So take your time. If within the next 2 weeks, you can whatever. But greatly appreciate you. If you need something, let us know. Call us here or get in contact me. You know how to contact me. Definitely, please do, and please let us know where you are. And so I'm just glad to hear and glad to know that everything is all right and the farm is doing well. Just going to have to make some adjustments there, which is expected. But take your time. And everything that you were saying, I hope everyone was really listening to what Brother Davis was saying, because spot on. Oh my goodness, when he talked about the different, with the age of Aquarius, you all should go back and listen to that show. It's absolutely right. All of the institutions have been just filled with ubiquitous fraud, from the religious institutions to the schooling institutions to the financial institutions. All of those institutions have completely, they're starting to show the cesspool that they've actually been. And they've been that way, and it's not just one organization, it's comprised of all of them. And so Brother Davis is absolutely right. I think Sister Davis is there in South Carolina. Sister Davis, is that you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hey, Sister Davis. Yes, so good to hear your voice. Yes, go ahead, Sister Davis.
Hey, Candle family. Yes, my husband and I were in separate locations, but
okay.
But I just want to add, and I know he said about doing the show, and I know you said about the 2 weeks and stuff, but what I want to add real quick is, in the meantime, if you want to make, when I make this statement, you'll understand why. And because we need to start getting some other things in motion. I saw on Facebook today, people were starting to complain about a real crazy cough. And they were like, wow, we getting this crazy cough on the back of this hurricane. Now, I see a different picture. And that's why I mentioned it for the Tando show, so we can start setting this up. It's fall.
Okay.
We should have already had our defense of our immune system in place. But let me show you what happened about 10 days ago. And I'm sure somebody on this call has picked it up. 10 days ago, they made an announcement that 3 planes came into the United States One came into New York and two came into Philadelphia.
Yes.
And they came
Yes.
from the Middle East. And the Middle East let these people on the plane that were vomiting, they had sore throats, and they had fevers, and they had severe coughs. Because they remember you saw on the news a little bit that they tried to quarantine the one plane, and I think Vanilla Ice, he was on like the second level, probably like a first class level, and he was videotaping it, and some people were coming out on gurneys, and then they held a couple of people for a little bit, and then they released them. Right after that plane hit New York, I think that 2 or 3 days later, a plane came into Philadelphia. I think it came in on a Tuesday. That Thursday was the first game. It was Philadelphia, I think, in Atlanta. They had their first season football game. So you can imagine the massive amount of people that were at that game. Plus, when they when the plane came into Philadelphia, it's a hub, so they all transferred in one of the places. I don't know if when I saw that, I just shivered in my bones, because this could be the possible making of a pandemic. I ain't trying to say it's going to be a pandemic, but they let people in to the United States that were sick. Now, what we need to do as a Tando family is kind of reboot some of our holistic practitioners that we have online, and start getting our thieves oil and start inoculating ourselves with holistic healing. And I ain't talking vaccines, of course, no flu shots. But we need to get this in motion, and we need to get it in motion very quickly, because next month in October, I'm not sure exactly the day, but in October, one of those dates, I think it's the 23rd or something, is the 100th anniversary of the pandemic of the Spanish flu that happened in 1918. And it's the 100th anniversary, and, that wiped out like 1 million people of the earth. So we, anniversaries have a way of rebooting things, and it could be, downsizing of the world. It could be, it's something that I think that we need to address, because just somebody randomly on Facebook said, wow, everybody's got this crazy cough. Now let's look at that cough situation and maybe some type of infection along with the hurricane, because right now, everybody's flooded. It's hard to get medications. This could be a witch's brew of a serious condition, a serious thing that could go rampant. So we need to, as a Tando family, really need to get together and just kind of go over some of our facts of what we need to do, different, ginger and turmeric, and, we need to get this together, because, of course, our children, and Dave, I'm a real children fighter here. We need to get this addressed, because where, other than schools, is the first place, mass hysteria with coughing and sneezing and runny noses. We need to address it. And I know you had said about 2 weeks or whatever, but in 2 weeks might be too late. We
See, in trustee training, there's a lot of things that are happening, and there's a lot of things globally that we got to pay attention to. Those of you that tune in for the first time, we talk about civics, we talk about economics, we talk about how these things need to be applied. This is a previous recording from my man Dave at Thanos Radio, and what comes to mind in all of this is that what's happening is, on a global perspective, we have to incorporate this and start preparing. See, the storm last week was one aspect of it. I can tell you today, since the Federal Reserve lost its accreditation, there's a lot of things I can't go into detail on in this broadcast, but I will tell you this. If you don't work diligently to go ahead and get your trust and family affairs in order, you're going to be in for a rude awakening, because there's a lot of speculation about that loss of accreditation. And it's starting to spill over into the day-to-day banking functions. I was in a conference call early part of this morning with the group that I'm working with a couple of trusts that I'm actually helping set up with a payroll scenario. And it was brought to my attention that because of the loss of accreditation, companies like the one that I'm working with that sets up payroll, they've been given some information about these corporations and information about this technology, environment, globalism, and so forth, where they're in a massive panic. And maybe they know something we don't, but what I was told that I can give you today, which is pertinent to trustee training, is that in order for them to stay in control, they have to have a certain amount of people looking in the wrong direction. Because there's so much that's going to happen at one time, you're going to eventually start looking outside the narrative. But if it's so many different things that are happening, you're not really focused on your focus. Now, here's an obvious question that I pose to the class. How many of you guys have noticed that your banking transactions are becoming more and more difficult to complete? For example, have you had any type of dealings where you actually was in the process of transferring money and you had to go through an extra level of security? These companies will call you up and they want to go through all the various different things that you're dealing with. And it's something you might have been doing as a norm, but for some reason there seems like a heightened sense of security. They want to ask you, how well do you know this person? The reason why I'm saying that is because the currency that's in circulation is insured, what they call FDIC insurance. But if the Federal Reserve loses accreditation, what does that mean for the assurance or insurance that's backing that currency or backing those assets that you hold in account? Well, if you have a car accident and it's rendered at your fault, your premium may go up. The insurance may become more expensive. And let's just apply that to the banks. Federal Reserve lost its accreditation. The FDIC insurance covers you up to $250,000 in these institutions that you have these controlled accounts. Well, the cost of that insurance is going up because of the loss of accreditation. Who is going to have to pay for that insurance? I know what you're saying. Well, that's not my fault, Brother Bay. That's the bank. They're going to have to pay. Listen to how it works. If the bank was not insolvent, then yes, the banks would be responsible or liable. But the banks are insolvent according to Basel I, Basel II, and Basel III. So since they're insolvent, they have to pass along that liability to those account holders. So they're coming up with glitches and hiccups in the system that will hold up transactions, delay transactions, or even in some cases, from what I've seen today, draw more than their appropriate share out of these accounts. Maybe they know something we don't. We talked about this for the last 10 months, and this was right before I really launched trustee training with a lot of folks that I'm working with right now. And this is why, in all this turbulence, this is the best time to implement a plan. And if that plan involves operating in commerce and trust, then you have alternatives. I spoke to a group last night that gave me a lot